Hi, kiddos. All right, so today we are going to go over C.3. So this is the human's impact on society or the communities in the area. I think that makes sense. All right, I'm going to get small. Whee! So a few things that you should note are there's actually not that many understandings, but there are quite a few applications and skills. So you're going to want to know specific examples of what I go over today, okay? So first of all, there's a whole bunch of different movies and clips and shows if you're interested in watching any of human impacts. But some things that I need you to know are the concept of what an alien species is. So an alien species is one that's not native. I think that makes sense. However, an alien species doesn't need to be invasive, but it can become invasive. So if you think about it, I have a hibiscus plant in my dining room. That hibiscus plant is native to Hawaii or more tropical regions, not Minnesota, specifically in the dining room of my house in Minnetonka. But that is an alien species. It's non-native to the habitat. And it was an intentional introduction of that hibiscus tree into my house. Now, if you also think about, if I look out my backyard into my dining room area, I have a bunch of buckthorn trees. Those buckthorn trees are also alien species. They are non-native to the habitat. However, what we notice about buckthorn trees is they are invasive. And the reason why they're invasive is because what they're doing is causing ecological or economical damage in that environment. So zebra mussels are a really great example of an alien species that is turned into an invasive species. Cane toads in Australia, we're going to talk about in just a second. Okay? So what we know to be true about alien species or about any species is if you bring an alien species to an ecosystem, we know that two organisms cannot live in the same niche for an extended length of time. That's what the competitive exclusionary principle states. Point blank, period. You can't have two. So, an advantage is going to come to one of them. Either the native one or the non-native one. If it's the native one, not a big deal. It's natural to the environment. If it's the non-native one, then that's when it becomes invasive, right? So what we're going to look at for advantages is a higher reproduction rate, larger in size, faster, or the biggest one is an absence of a predator. This is the one that's going to come in handy with the cane toads, okay? So if you think about buckthorn trees grow really super fast. They are also the first to flower in the spring and they're last to go dormant in the fall. So therefore they have a higher reproduction rate. They grow faster, and they're physically larger in size. Therefore, buckthorn trees, as an alien species, are an invasive species because they outcompete the oak or the maples or the birch trees in that area. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so here's an example. The harlequin ladybug, which in the UK is called a ladybird. It's not a mistype. So the harlequin ladybird was brought to the UK specifically to manage populations of aphids. Aphids are those little white, greeny things that live and eat on plants. And so they were brought in as a control system. The issue is that harlequin ladybug or bird has a really broad diet, lives in a really broad range of habitats. It is much larger in size with a higher reproductive rate than the native ladybugs that were in the UK at the time. So what happened? The harlequin ladybug's population increased and the native population decreased. So they outcompeted and caused the native species to become endangered, right? Additionally, fun factoid, that the people introducing the harlequin ladybird, or bug, didn't know about is that in cold weather, when the harlequin ladybug doesn't have enough food, it goes and eats the crops that it's supposed to be protecting. Ha! Fun. Okay. So, Another one is cane toads. So in Australia, they are trying to grow sugarcane. And this is also done in Hawaii. And Hawaii grows sugarcane very well. And they also have cane toads. And the cane toads were eating the beetles or the bugs that eat the sugarcane. So you have this natural predator of the beetles in Hawaii, right? Beetles want to eat the sugarcane, cane toads eat the beetles. So the beetles are kept under wraps, the sugarcane does really, really well. So in Australia, when those same types of bugs or pests were eating the sugarcane, the Australians went, aha, I have an idea. I'm going to introduce cane toads, right? Well, here's the deal. The cane toads are non-native, so we know that they're an alien species. However, they become a invasive species because they reproduce very quickly, and they also secrete toxins in their skin, which means the predators that were in Australia didn't want to eat the cane toad. So therefore, they become plurific. So they actually have this Operation Toad Day Out, where people literally go collect cane toads, put them in bags, freeze them so they die, turn them in, and then they grind them up and make them into fertilizer. That's how many cane toads Australia has. It's ridiculous. Nothing wants to eat it, right? Okay, so this is happening kind of in our waterways. We have alien species that has turned to invasive species, right, with zebra mussels. That's a huge one. You can see here the zebra mussels coating pipes, things, that's an issue. Another Australian issue was with bunny rabbits. Bunny rabbits reproduce very quickly. They have a high reproduction rate. And so what we need to understand is the concept of a biological control. So biological would mean something that I have to control that's living. And so here's what they actually have done in Australia. Scientists created a virus called rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus, which can abbreviate into RHDV. RHDV. And to hemorrhage means to bleed, right? So if you create a virus that causes the rabbit to bleed, the goal of that is to control the populations of the rabbits, right? You're not creating a warm and fuzzy virus. You're creating a virus that's going to specifically kill rabbits. So you're controlling the population of rabbits via this rabbit disease virus. Okay, so it was a solution. They tested it clearly in a quarantine situation because they don't want to introduce a virus that kills other things other than rabbits or, whatever it may be. And it was really super effective. So that's actually how Australia has gotten their rabbit population under control. The issue is, the thing that's popping up now a little bit, is they're finding rabbits that are RHD virus, so this rabbit hemorrhagic disease viral, resistant. And so they're not really sure if those rabbits keep breeding what they're going to do. So a biological control is something that has to work. So that's the reason why the cane toads aren't a good biological control, because the cane toads turned into an invasive species. That's the reason why this virus example is a better example than the toads. Hopefully that makes sense. There's a database of all the global species, or invasive species, if you're curious. It's super fun and exciting. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about the concept of bioaccumulation and biomagnification, because they're both very different. So, if you are this orange fish right here, we know that tuna, for example, has high levels of mercury in it, which is why there's actually warning on the labels of tuna or other fish that you can't eat a certain amount if you're pregnant. It's really bad for the fetus that's growing inside of you to accumulate toxins. So a fish will swim through its waterways. It will eat whether it is little fish or seaweed or something like that, and they will accumulate mercury inside their body. So accumulation happens on one fish on one trophic level. That's accumulation. Now, if the bigger fish goes and eats all the little fish that also have mercury in them, it is accumulating or getting that amount of mercury. So if it ate 4 fish, it would get the 20 parts per million that this fish had and the 20 parts per million that this fish had, so on and so forth. It would make sense that this fish now has 80 parts per million. And now if the killer whale eats a whole bunch of the bluefish, it's clearly going to have more mercury in it. So the accumulation of mercury has increased in each trophic level. That is called biomagnification. So biomagnification is if we look at this trophic level versus this, versus this, versus this, the amount of mercury has magnified or gone up the pyramid. Accumulation is happening at one level because you are physically accumulating it or getting it into your system. So there is a difference between accumulation and magnification. We see this in a really clear example of DDT. So DDT is a pesticide, and DDT is still used today, not in the US, but here's what we find. The pesticide does a really nice job killing pests on crops, right? So it's a really good deterrent for pests on crops. You get a really high crop yield, so that's beneficial to the farmer. You also don't have pests. Great. Here's what we found. When it rains really heavy, that DDT gets washed off the crops and into the waterway. It then gets accumulated at each trophic level and magnified as we go up the pyramid, right? So we see this accumulation and magnification of a chemical, in this case, DDT. What they find is that it stores really quickly in the fat of an animal. So it accumulates in really high quantities really, really quickly. And the issue that we're finding found was in really large birds because they were really high up on the pyramid, right? They ate at all these levels. So therefore, they were really drastically impacted. How they were impacted is by the shells of the offspring that it produced were really, really, really thin. So if you have the shells that are thin, you have a higher likelihood of not having that offspring actually come to life, right? Or to fruition. So here's what we know. Scientists studied peregrine falcons. And so we know in the U.S. that in 1955, there was a huge amount of DDT usage. It was used widespread in the U.S. We know that in 1972, DDT was banned in the U.S. So here's what we kind of saw. We see the hawks per day, which would mean the population size, right, is fairly consistent here, and all of a sudden it drops. But in 1972 is when it actually disbanded, right? We banned DDT. It actually took quite a few years for that DDT to get through the system of the hawks, meaning those older hawks that had DDT in them had to die, and the younger hawks had to keep making more and more and more babies. So you'll notice once that DDT gets out of the system, we actually have a huge increase in hawks flying over this particular mountain sanctuary every day, right? So that's a good thing. That's great, showing a great trend as far as DDT links clearly decrease. We can also see, I'm going to move myself, we can see the eggshell thickness. Here's the trend line. We can actually visibly see the use here. It's really, really nice and stable. And all of a sudden in 45, when we start using DDT, we have this stable, much thinner eggshell. So overall, we see this trend drastically change right around the introduction of DDT, right? Here's just another way to look at it. This is in parts per million, and then the eggshell thickness. So the higher the parts per million of this thing, or this pesticide, the lower the eggshell thickness is, right? Okay. So, why is it still used? Why is DDT still beneficial? Well, DDT is a pesticide, remember? And it's only banned in some parts of the world because we don't have malaria. In other parts of the world, there is malaria. And so that's a really high, important distinction because the pests are deterred by malaria. So do you want humans to die or do you want peregrine falcons or other big birds of prey?